This is about answering that pain point that we as an American electorate have around the Electoral College. It's confusing, we don't understand it, and we deserve to understand it. So that's why I made this film.
That's Maximina Juson, the filmmaker behind the extraordinary and necessary new documentary, One Person, One Vote. It's a film that takes a closer look at something that lots of Americans rarely question, the Electoral College voting system.
Maximina's film explores the system's not-so-equal representation and its racist origins rooted in protecting the power of slave owners. This episode drops on Juneteenth, and it couldn't be a better time to examine the realities of the system we use to elect our president.
We talked to Maximina about how her multi-hyphenated career as a musician, user experience designer, and filmmaker helped her take on this difficult subject.
She also shares the perspective-shifting moments she had while making the documentary, especially her extraordinary experience when she found herself filming at the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
As someone who had been researching the Electoral College for years before that point, to then see Electoral College history unfold before my very eyes was stunning.
Welcome to The Breakout, a show about smashing through life's little boxes and forging your own path. I'm Dr. Carrie Ulrich.
And I'm Kelly Gunther. Carrie and I are people and change experts and best friends. We've spent more than 25 years helping organizations navigate change and get the best out of their people.
Come on, we know change is hard, but staying the same can even be harder. On The Breakout, we prove that you can escape expectations, and best of all, we show you how. Maximina, thank you so much. We're so excited to talk to you. In a couple sentences, what are you helping other people break out of?
I think that every person's life has a theme, and I consider myself a media multi-hyphenate. And thematically, it's been my job to be a communicator with audiences in different formats. And that's my passion. And I love interacting with people, and I love communicating and connecting with people. And so, when you feel that urge or you feel that calling, which I did at every step of the way, I didn't shy away from it. I think if you take a moment to think about in your shape-shifting ventures, what problem can you solve for people? If you identify a problem and you assign yourself to that problem in your shape-shifting venture, then your chances for success are a lot higher.
Yeah, I think that there's such creativity in problem solving. And so when we heard about the film that you're doing about the Electoral College, talk about making people think, right? It's something that is kind of there, and we all know, and we hear about these swing states, and we kind of just, that's what we know. We don't know any better. And when Kelly and I talk a lot about expectations, sometimes those expectations, you don't even realize they're there because they're so embedded. And talk about something that's incredibly embedded, the Electoral College. Your film is magnificent, by the way. But what made you even take it on?
So going back to solving problems, I think it is a huge pain point for the vast majority of Americans that we don't understand the Electoral College, how it works, or why we have it in the first place. And when I did research on whether or not a film like this had been made already, there hadn't been one. And I felt that I was uniquely positioned as someone who has been a live performing musician, someone who's worked on the internet, making experiences easier to use and understand for people who are using them. So I'm a user experience architect and designer. And it's been my job to make things easy to understand and also enjoyable and entertaining. And so I thought that I was uniquely positioned to tell the story about the Electoral College because I would set out to do it in a way that wasn't only informational and educational, but was also entertaining and compelling and captivating.
Yeah.
And efficient, telling an efficient story as well, not making it a 2-hour movie or,
Right.
but
A 6-hour drama.
in and out, in and out.
Yeah. And I think you did such a magnificent job of making it that entertaining. So, what in 3 minutes could you describe the Electoral College?
Okay, well, the Electoral College is America's very unique method for electing a president. There is no other democratic country that uses this method to elect their president. And there's no other election in the United States that doesn't just go by simple majority. What you're actually doing is you're voting for a slate of electors that support a candidate and their vice president. You're not voting directly for the president. And a lot of people don't realize or understand that. And there's also a slate of electors for every single candidate that you have on the ballot. So when you select your presidential candidate, when you vote for president, you're actually voting for a slate of electors for that party that are supposedly obligated to vote for that candidate. But in almost half the states, there's no obligation whatsoever. They can vote for whoever they want with no penalty, which a lot of people don't realize either. I did this funny exercise on my film where I asked each and every interviewee what the Electoral College is. And the answer that I got from each and every person was completely different because it's such a complicated and intricate system that differs from state to state, that even I, as a person who set out to make a film about the Electoral College, learned something new about the Electoral College each and every day.
That is bananas. That is bananas. Because you're right. Again, we talk about these expectations that sometimes you don't even realize you have them because they're just so ingrained. And when I think of the Electoral College, in my head is, oh yeah, it's majority vote. And whoever wins the majority gets like the 55 electoral votes for California or something like that. And it seems disproportionate. It seems weird. And then all of a sudden it comes down to Nebraska has one electoral college vote or something that goes to a city in Omaha. Like, it's just such a strange mix. Maximina, what was maybe an aha moment for you when you looked at the history of why it started? Because you talk about that in the film, and it was disturbing and understandable how it started. But what was your insight or aha, why it began this way?
When I set out to make a film about the Electoral College, I always thought it was important for us to know, why we have this institution in the first place. How did we get it? A lot of people don't even know that it's a clause in the Constitution. So first and foremost, I knew that I needed very, very high caliber, watertight scholarship go into the film. And so I reached out to the top scholars who were speaking or teaching about the Electoral College. And one of the first historians that I reached out to was Dr. Paul Finkelman, who's been writing about the Constitution as it relates to slavery, for decades, like at least 4 or 5 decades now. So he sat me down and, we talked about the Electoral College from beginning to now, but, his focus is on, early constitutional history. And he talked about that, at the time there were 3 million people in the United States. There were 13 states and 3 million people, and 700,000 of which were enslaved. So that's almost a third, right? But those enslaved people were concentrated in slaveholding states. So Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland. So when they were coming together to write the Constitution, which would be a set of laws that would preside over the entire Union, those slaveholding states, number one, were very concerned that slavery would get taken away from them. And number two, half of the people in their states, like Virginia, almost half, would not be able to vote, nor would they be able to be counted towards congressional representation because they were not actual citizens, and they didn't want to make them citizens, and they didn't want to give them the right to vote. So how do you then make an indirect method of voting wherein you can count your entire population of people in addition to your enslaved population, count them for more representation and ultimately more votes in the Electoral College. Now, there were other concerns like big states versus small states, but then, the Senate versus the House kind of addressed that issue, right? How do we get to a place where, we can get this representation without any rights? And so an indirect method of voting was what they came up with. It was not something that any of the states were completely happy with, but it was the one thing that they could all agree on after a long, hot summer of, blocked windows because they didn't want any press to hear their conversations, which slavery was a topic of conversation every day.
Yeah.
And just imagine the sweltering heat in the summertime, no AC. From May to September, they voted dozens and dozens of times around how to elect the president. And by the end of the summer, they're like, you know what, this one works. Let's just do it. We've got George Washington. Everyone's going to be unanimous on him for the next 8 years. We'll fix it by, but they never got around to it other than the 12th Amendment.
It's depressing to think about how it started and that it continues to this day. This film is just so important for so many reasons. One, because we all need to understand it, truly understand it, so we can be educated, which when you're educated, you tend to make better decisions. But it's also an important part of our history that wasn't taught to us.
Like it's a fugue state that we're all in. We're kind of very sleepy, myself included. And I feel like I follow politics. Like I feel like maybe I know a little bit more than the average person, maybe. But on the Electoral College, absolutely not. And the history of it, why it was so depressing to me that it started because of keeping power, right? It wasn't started for make sure it's equal, make sure. And I think that's what I kind of thought. That's what we're taught in school. The fact that we're the only country who has this, the fact that it is just so embedded that some of us kind of know it's really stupid and it's not the majority vote. But I think in my head, I always thought it was the majority vote and the electors just went with the majority. Like, again, I can't even articulate it. And that is such a bad expectation, right? When you can't even articulate what it is, but it's in you, how devastating and how much that can harm. And it is harming our entire democracy. So on that uplifting note,
this country is 225 years old. And for this to be really like the first film that I'm aware of that discusses the Electoral College is unbelievable.
So, Maximina, why do you think, with all your interviews and digging in deep to the Electoral College, why do you think it's such a mystery? It's like almost a black box for most of our citizens in the States. And if we can't understand it, I guarantee our international partners cannot understand it at all. So why is it such a mystery? And why does it remain a mystery?
Well, I think one problem is like the Olympics, people talk about the Electoral College once every 4 years, right? And so it's top of mind for that period of time where the election is front and center of the national discourse. And then it goes away and people go back to their regular lives and all the other things that are being inundated with in the media that, they don't think about it. But beyond that, it's also an extremely complicated system that differs from state to state. And it's just not information that's easy to get to. Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, I think when you look at how it was created, even though we have 3 pro-slavery clauses in the Constitution, the word slave was never used, or slavery was never used. And the reason for that was intentional because the states where slavery was beginning to be abolished knew that if they brought back a constitution that had pro-slavery clauses written into it, that it would not be ratified. So they created language, right, that talked about slavery and enslaved people without using those words. And I think that just created from the beginning, right, a sense of masking.
Yes.
and a layer of complexity that throughout time, it was just really above most people's heads.
Right. You're not transparent about it. And if you keep saying, look over here, and I'm doing things over here, after a couple hundred years, you don't really notice it. And so it becomes, again, so embedded. I think, Maximina, you were actually at the Capitol filming January 6th. So I know you had some scary moments. What was it like to be there on January 6th?
Yeah. So what people don't realize was January 6th was the last step of the Electoral College process. So because I had been following real world electors throughout the 2020 election, it made sense for me to go to the Capitol to capture footage. I figured that there would be protests and counter protests. But as someone who had been researching the Electoral College for years before that point, to then see Electoral College history unfold before my very eyes was stunning. And, a lot of people would ask me, like, did you know that was going to happen? Did you know? No, number one. No, I did not know that was going to happen. But to be there, I basically started my day at the Ellipse, where I saw the tweet that Trump was going to be giving a speech at the Ellipse. And so I'm like, okay, I'll start there. I figured that there would be protests and counter protests to capture. And then as the day progressed, we were told to walk down the mall, to the Capitol. So I did that, and I was just following, filming everyone. And then at a certain point, I get a alert on my phone, Capitol has been breached. Right. So now I'm getting text messages from people that I know around the country saying, are you okay?
Right.
And my producer saying, whatever you do, stay out of the fray. And I said, okay, well, the minute I feel unsafe, I will turn around.
Yeah.
But I just kept walking towards the Capitol until eventually I made it all the way to the Capitol steps. I mean, there was no one there, to stop us. I did not enter the building. But as I was there, I was filming. And then at that point, someone did come up to me and was aggressive. During the course of the day, people would ask me, what outlet are you from? And I would tell them the truth that I was an independent filmmaker. And they were fine with that. But as the day progressed and things got more extreme, and especially right there at the steps of the Capitol, that's when someone threatened me and told me that they would destroy my camera, that I needed to stop filming. I responded to that person like, listen, I'm willing to talk to you, to explain to you why I'm here and what I'm doing. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to take away my freedom. And when I said that, this guy with a QAnon hat steps forward and says to the guy who was threatening me and says, she's right. She has a right to be here, and then the guy that was threatening me was like, she's just going to take it and she's going to distort it and she's going to twist it around, make us look bad. And the QAnon guy was like, we don't have to listen to what they say. We don't have to listen to what they say. At that point, I felt somebody fiddling with my camera and I looked back and, I didn't see anything. But then when I tried to record again, I saw no media. And so someone had taken one of my media cards out of my camera. And so then I stepped back and I was just really taken aback by this. And I was looking around to see who it might be. And that's when the guy with the QAnon hat and a couple of his friends came over to me and they said, miss, are you okay? That was completely out of line. That's not what this is about. He shouldn't be threatening you like that. And,
wow.
And then that's when the guy who had been threatening me came back over to us and started calling them traitors, basically. You traitor!
Wow.
How dare you? I came here to die. Things like that. Like, I'm ready to die for this cause, basically. And the guy who he called a traitor lunged at him and said, F you, I'm not a traitor, and lunged at him, and they started going at it. And I was
Oh
like,
my
oh,
God.
okay. I do not want anybody to get hurt
Right.
on my behalf. So that's when I said it was time for me to go home. But at this point, it was like maybe 4 or 5 o'clock. It was past the curfew they had made that day. And I was 2 miles away from my car. So I had to walk back to my car at a very long distance. And I was exhausted and also obviously just kind of unnerved.
Adrenaline.
you know.
Yeah.
And then again, some other gentleman walked up to me and said, hey, what outlet are you with? And then I said I was an independent filmmaker. And then I said, yeah, I had just been mugged. Someone had just stolen half of my footage, basically. So again, these were protesters, Trump protesters. And they were like, we're going to make sure you get back to your car safely. And one of them took my camera, helped me carry my equipment back, so we walked miles back. And at that point I was like, listen, you guys have done enough for me. I'll figure my way back home. And they're like, absolutely not. We're going to make sure you get home safe. And they were very kind and protective. Eventually I did make it home. We had to make a pit stop at a hotel to have dinner with their family who had all come down for the protest. All of that was quite an experience, but it also taught me that you cannot just lump, a ton of people together into one us versus them bucket.
Right.
There was a lot of kindness that was extended towards me that day, towards people with whom I hold different views, but they saw me in my humanity. I saw them in their humanity. And it was an incredible once in a lifetime experience to, number one, witness, one of the most historical days in our nation's history, but also to be right there in the midst of all the people to really see and understand where they were coming from.
We'll get back to the interview after this quick break.
The Breakout comes to you from Abrachi Group. We offer coaching and consulting to help you dig into change. Here's what we know. Only about 10% of us are really self-aware. Without self-awareness, improvement is tough, because if you don't know what box you're in, you can't break out of it. That's where we come in.
We've got a soft spot for people itching to forge a fresh path, the high flyers who need to be nudged out of career ruts, teams who are looking to become more aligned, and yes, even those bold souls who've occasionally worn the jerk badge. Connect with us at abrachigroup.com. January 6th, what a roller coaster of emotions that day for you, which it should be a very boring day. January 6th, no one even knows that really happens. Mm-hmm. In my head, we were all elected in November. And for you to have the scary, the mugging, and then all of a sudden the same group is like, no, we're going to protect you. And I was just thinking, Kelly, of how Maximina said, it's my freedom. Like you were so calm in that moment as someone's doing that to you. And I thought, I don't think Kelly and I would be as calm. I think there would be a lot more swear words.
No, I don't think it's calm. And certainly it was a very courageous act for you to be going through what you did and still making the effort to film and show what happened. Because certainly I think we've all seen by this point, the outcome and the just sheer tragedy of the day, for sure. I'm wondering, what kind of response have you had so far for this film, despite the fact that it's not quite out yet for the general public? What kind of feedback have you received?
It's been phenomenal. And when we got to the Q&A portion of the evening, most people would basically start their question with first off, thank you. And a couple of them said, I felt really dumb about 80 minutes ago, but now I feel really smart.
Yeah.
I didn't have the information to be able to talk about the Electoral College, and so I didn't.
Yep.
And so if this film empowers people to talk about the Electoral College and to dialogue around it in a way that they haven't been able to before, then that to me is the goal that I have been trying to reach, is that let's get to a place where we're not demonizing, but we're dialoguing. And so even when I went out into different communities with the 4 electors, that I followed, I went there in an effort of understanding, right? I didn't go there to try to film people to make them look bad or weird, but I really wanted to go and understand, right, the positions of and the motivations for each and every one of my electors, and to present them in all their humanity. And so right now our country is just devolved into vitriol and hatred. Vitriol and hatred are great fundraising tactics for politicians. And so I wanted to make this film about the people and the process. Every time people would say, hey, you should interview this politician, I'm like, no, this is about the people and the process. The candidates are ancillary, really. This is about answering that pain point that we as an American electorate have around the Electoral College. It's confusing. We don't understand it. And we deserve to understand it. And so that's why I made this film.
I think the other thing that impacted me was the power of the swing states. That in a lot of cases, you can cast your vote, doesn't necessarily mean anything. But you've got a handful of 12, 13 states that can really obviously swing an election. So it's fascinating.
And then she has that one visual that shows folks in California, their vote counts so much less than a vote in Wyoming. And because of the ratio of electorates to the population. And it's no one likes to feel disenfranchised. No one. And we're kind of all, we're accepting this expectation. And that's what you and I, Kelly, talk about all the time, is undo these expectations. You don't have to follow this. And yet we all are following this bullshit expectation of the Electoral College, and we're not a majority rule democracy. Whereas everyone else, every other election in the United States is like that. Every other, except for this one.
Last question for you, Maximina. You have 1 minute with someone who's stuck and they want to break out. What do you tell them?
I tell them, do your homework, but don't doubt yourself.
I love that.
Amazing. Spoken like a true researcher, filmmaker. I love that. When do you anticipate the film being released?
Right now, the date will be in the fall, in October, on PBS Independent Lens. And PBS is also including the film as part of a democracy initiative, which I have yet to learn what that means. But yes, it'll be part of a PBS democracy initiative, but premiere through Independent Lens in October.
Well, we're so grateful to you, Maximina, for going into and doing all of the research necessary to explain this very complicated process and capturing it in a way that is so compelling. Thank you for your courage and being there on January 6th as well, and for all your hard work in bringing this to life.
Thank you for having me today, and thank you for taking the time to talk about One Person, One Vote, along with all the other shape-shifting ventures that I've done. And I hope this helps other people to just kind of go for it. Go for it. Mm-hmm. Do it.
Absolutely. That was filmmaker Maximina Juson talking about her important film, One Person, One Vote. And this is The Breakout from Abrachi Group.
At Abrachi Group, we specialize in coaching and consulting for brave new directions. Connect with us at abrachigroup.com.
And don't forget to subscribe to The Breakout so you never miss a new episode. And make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Breakout Pod. I'm Kelly Gunther.
And I'm Dr. Carrie Ulrich. See you next time.